Hey, it's Seth, and this is the 9. The first of the 9. Scale. How big do you want to be? How big of an impact do you want to make? How much money do you seek to earn? How many employees do you want to have? Do you want to be famous? How many customers are you seeking? Do you want to have a legacy? How long is this project going to run? Are you willing to answer the phone in the middle of the night? For how long? Do you want to work on Saturdays and Sundays? Do you want to know the name of every one of your employees? How much debt are you willing to take on? All of these questions come down to one simple idea: scale. So let's talk for a minute about Kleber's law. Let's talk for a minute about elephants and sparrows. Geoffrey West, in the book Scale, talks about the fact that just about every animal on Earth gets 1.5 billion heartbeats in a lifetime. The biggest exception are humans. We had 1.5 billion in a lifetime until a few hundred years ago when we started extending our lives by using technology. But leaving that aside for a minute, every animal gets 1.5 billion heartbeats. And the smaller the animal, the faster its heart rate, which means that a mouse lives about 2 years, a shrew less than that, and an elephant 75. So, do you want to be an elephant, or do you want to be a shrew or a mouse? Because there's plenty of room for both. But we have to act in a certain way to become the organization we seek to become. Let me tell you about my friend Chip Conley. Chip Conley is a creator of community. He built a significant hotel chain. He used to be one of the leaders at Airbnb. And I was a co-author with him in 1986 when the two of us were 26 years old of my first book. Chip Conley, when he was running the hotels, was an entrepreneur running at scale. I, on the other hand, was an entrepreneur with 0 employees. And we were sitting in one of his hotels, and I said, Chip, how do you do this? How are you running 14 hotels without losing sleep every single night? Don't they call you in the middle of the night when they're out of towels in room 38B? He looked at me and he said, yeah, that was a problem. And then I realized one of my first jobs is to hire somebody so that no one ever calls me. That as an entrepreneur, he understood that his job was not to do any of the jobs. That if there was a job to be done that he could describe, he needed someone else to do it. Anytime that wasn't true, he wasn't doing his job, because his job was not to do any of the jobs. So if you're an entrepreneur who seeks to build something at scale, your first job is to pick a project that scales without your magic, your passion, your care in every single role. Because none of the people you hire are going to have all of those things, because if they did, they'd be you, and they're not. They have chosen not to be you. They have chosen to follow you, to work for you instead. Now, I disagree with many of the ideas in the E-Myth Revisited, but one of them is essential for someone who seeks to build a business at scale. And it is this: design every job so that it can be done by an available, lower skilled person. Because if a job needs a linchpin, a magician, somebody who is really hard to find, that can work for a studio. It can work for a smaller organization, but it can't work for something at scale. So we begin with this. Your job as an entrepreneur is different depending on the scale of what you are building. And what about Chip Conley? Well, after he built his hotel chain to 18 hotels, he sold it. He sold it to a company that wanted to be at a bigger scale. Then he became an entrepreneur at a scale of 1, working with people in the festival community. Then he was persuaded to join Airbnb, an organization at much bigger scale, funded to be at much bigger scale. And now he's founded the Modern Elder Academy. And if you go to his resort in Baja, he'll be there because it is at a different scale once again. Pick your scale. It makes a whole bunch of choices for you. I'm pretty notorious for pointing out the difference between freelancing and entrepreneurship. So let's take a minute here to dissect them. A lot of people are looking for a job without a boss. And if you realize that is you, that's a great insight. But it comes with a fork in the road, a choice about what it is to build that job without a boss. A job without a boss is very compelling because for most of us, a job is something we need and a boss is something we don't want. So a job without a boss means you get to do your craft, you get paid for it, but no one tells you when to show up. Here's the challenge of a job without a boss. You probably will end up as an Uber driver. That if you want easy in, easy out, there are people who have built large organizations that make it easy for you to do easy in, easy out. You can become an Uber driver in a few hours, I bet. But, and it's a huge but, even though you don't have a personal boss, you have a system that doesn't care about you. If you sign up to do commodity work at an hourly rate, you will get paid a commodity wage. And the system is going to work overtime to lower the respect you get, the dignity you get, and the wage you get. The challenge of a job without a boss is that it puts you in a position of weakness because you are easily replaceable. The step above that is to be a distinctive freelancer, to be, if you want to call it, an entrepreneur with no employees. An entrepreneur at that size, let's call that person a freelancer, is someone who says, I do the work. If you hire this organization, you're actually hiring me. And to be a freelancer is a joy. I've been a freelancer for decades. To be a freelancer means you get to decide what you make, but it comes with the obligation that you need to make something distinctively you. Distinctively you, in which there are no easy replacements. If you say there are 50 people who can teach your kids piano, and I am one of them, then I need a reason to pay you more. Because otherwise I'll just pick the convenient one or the cheap one. You can pick anybody and I'm anybody is insufficient. I know you need this job, but I don't care because I'm the customer and I don't care. I care about my kid. I care about my pocketbook. I care about my budget. So if you're going to be a freelancer who succeeds, distinguishing this from an entrepreneur who's building an entity, then you're going to need to make a commitment to do something distinctive. But let's get back to this idea of being an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur is going beyond this idea of I am the only employee to saying I'm going to build something at a scale where I'm making an influence, maybe even making a living while I sleep, where I am building an asset, where I am creating something that spreads, that earns me more reputation and more impact over time, and that I can scale appropriately. So we begin with, how big do you want to be? And then we have to figure out what matches that. Because as Ray Kroc showed us, you can show up in a space where no one is big, hamburgers, and in the course of a lifetime, become one of the biggest employers in the United States. It is possible to do that. That's what McDonald's did. But that's really hard. It makes more sense to be Burger King or Kentucky Fried Chicken because someone identified that scale was possible. Because if you're trying to be a pioneer of the very system that you're working in, now you have two jobs, to be a pioneer and to build an entity that works. It's way easier at this stage in your career to say, show me a model. Show me a model of someone who has come before, who has built something at scale. If the scale you seek is 10 outlets owned and operated, it makes a lot of sense to think about building a car wash, because there are plenty of people who have built car wash chains with 10 outlets. There is, as far as I know, no car wash chain with 5,000 owned and operated outlets. There must be a reason for that. It's like being a mouse who wants to live for 75 years. Maybe it's possible, but I'm not sure that's the best use of your time. That the idea is to find an organizational structure and impact you seek to make that works appropriately with the scale you seek to achieve. One of the traps that entrepreneurs fall into is building something familiar. That's why there are so many hairdressers, because you've seen that. You've imagined growing up to do that. Mailman, postman, milkman. Here, I'll go do that. But those things are inherently small time because so many people want to do them. Easy in, easy out. What we know is every time real estate prices go up, the number of realtors also goes up. Easy in, easy out. The alternative is to find a spot where scale is possible at the level you want to work, where it might be hard to get in, where it might be hard to get to the level, but you know it can be done. And so your effort will be repaid because you found a model. So what are we talking about in terms of scalability? Well, one thing you'll notice about most restaurants that are working at scale is they are not owned and operated. They're actually franchises, or they act like franchises like Chick-fil-A does. The reason is because the people who wanted to build them at scale discovered two things. One, funding it by raising money from the people who were buying the local outlets was the cheapest way to get big. We'll talk about money later in this course. And two, having a local owner made sure that all the details that are so hard to control from headquarters would be controlled by someone with a lot of skin in the game. That having someone, a business person, not an employee, locally, making sure that the managers and the staff were showing up on time, making sure the place was clean, solving 1,000 little problems because the cleaning solution didn't show up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon was workable. And so those two things danced together to enable McDonald's to have the scale it grew to. Starbucks took a different path. Starbucks mostly skipped the franchise path, and they own and operate their own stores. As a result, they have more control over the people they hire, the benefits they get. On the other hand, there is definitely an issue for them of making sure that they are building enough middle structure, soft structure of people who aren't actually serving you the coffee to make sure that the training and the maintenance is everything that they want it to be. But yes, Starbucks works at a huge scale. We're not just talking about businesses, entrepreneurship that makes a profit. We're talking about any organization that is designed to be at a certain scale. So if your goal is to change the culture of your community, that's only a few thousand people. Organize for that. Build for that. Use that as an asset, as a bonus, not as something to be avoided. We could talk about scale all day, but let's talk about some other elements of scale. As we'll hear later, some things, assets you'll need, cost money before they pay for themselves. In order to get those assets, you're going to need to buy them. In order to buy them, you're probably going to need to borrow some money. How much debt are you willing to take on? Where are you going to get this debt? And how will you pay it back? So here's a really fascinating example. Years ago, when CAT scans, these giant technical devices that could detect cancers before anything else, were new, there was an opportunity and there was a problem. The opportunity is that insurance companies would pay thousands of dollars for one CAT scan. The opportunity was doctors wanted to prescribe CAT scans to their patients. The problem was that a CAT scan machine cost $1.5 million. You didn't get $1.5 million from the insurance company when you bought it. You got $1,500 for one scan. What that meant was you didn't break even until long after you did 1,000 CAT scans. And most hospitals couldn't organize at the scale they were to figure out how to buy a $1.5 million CAT scan. My friend Barry figured out that there was a disconnect between the people who had money, in this case insurance companies with money to invest, and hospitals that needed the machine to get their cash flow going and to serve their patients. Insurance companies, of course, have tons of money that they need to invest so that they can earn returns and pay off the claims later. So he built a business that connected the two of them. And the offer to the hospital was simple. We'll give you the CAT scan. You give us the $1,000 for every CAT scan until you've done 1,500 CAT scans, and then pay some interest and you're done. Everybody comes out ahead. This is not a sales pitch. This is an offer. And as a result, Barry built a company that ended up installing tens of thousands of CAT scan machines because the offer that was made matched the scale of all the people who were playing the game. If you as an entrepreneur said, well, I'll just do 2 CAT scan machines, the scale wouldn't work because the insurance company says it's not worth talking to you if you only want to borrow $3 million. And it takes forever to sell the first 2, 3, 4 hospitals. It doesn't get easy till you get to hospital number 30. So if you're running a small-time business around that idea, you're going to fail. You're not at the right scale. On the other hand, if we think about a giant multinational like Siemens, well, if they had thought of it, they probably could have cut the middleman out, gone to the insurance company directly, and had their own leasing division. But it was probably not a big enough market for a company of that scale. I spent some time talking with Nicole Walters, an influential entrepreneur who teaches her followers about how to grow, how to make an impact. She's an online guru. She built a company with 20 employees that does millions of dollars a year in business. She's the center of it. You take a Nicole Walters course because she's teaching it. You follow her on Facebook or Instagram because it's her. She understands what she can scale and what she can't. She's not building a chain of hotels, but she is able to write a book, have a TV show, whatever she can leverage to use her voice to make a difference in the world. When you look at many of the popular online services, the ones that are really at scale, they don't do that many different things. They don't have that many different product lines. They have hundreds or thousands of employees, all supporting 1 or 2 simple functions, because that's what they've built. They've built an elephant. They're trying to build something for scale. They're trying to build something where if someone quits, no one in the outside world will notice. And that's their choice. That's not the entrepreneur I wanted to be, but that's the entrepreneur they signed up to be. What scale do you want to be? There are 2 kinds of pain that can come from getting a scale you don't expect. One comes from building an organization that you hope will get to scale X that only reaches a smaller scale than that. The problem with that, of course, is that you are built, funded, structured to be bigger than you end up being. That's super painful. The other problem is one where you get to a bigger scale than you expected, but you don't shift the way you manage and lead the organization. In the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, I pioneered part of the internet. I built one of the first internet companies called Yoyodyne. The idea of Yoyodyne, we invented commercial email marketing that wasn't spam, was to use email to interact with people. This was before the World Wide Web, in ways that would make them happy and also benefit our sponsors. And I had studied the way people interacted a lot. I was a game designer and I was a maniac about creating stuff. My vision was to be the Goodson Todman of game shows for the internet, to figure out how to give away $1 million online, to come up with fun ways for people to engage with this new medium that they were calling email. And I loved brainstorming with clients. I loved inventing solutions. So I built a studio, a small team of people that would go to a client, come up with something, sketch it out, build it, implement it, and grow it. And over time, the company began to succeed. Then we went out to raise some money. We raised $5 million from Fred Wilson. It was one of his first investments with Jerry Colonna back in the days when it was called Flatiron. So it was one of the first East Coast internet investments. With $5 million raised, you've made a decision about scale. And the decision is, this isn't a company that's run out of a garage. The decision is, this company has to make millions and millions of dollars. The decision is, the investors aren't going to be happy unless you go public or sell it. And so we grew. And we grew to more than 70 people. And of the more than 70 people in the company, perhaps a dozen were working in our Boston office on tech, and more than 50 were working in our New York office. And of that group, almost every single one of them reported to me because that's what I was comfortable with. I was comfortable with the incoming. I was playing ping pong, batting it back and forth. You have this problem? Tell me about it. How do we solve this? What do we do about that? And this was a mistake because you can't scale that. I had taken on all these jobs because I thought I was the only person who could do them. I was wrong. Actually, I had taken on all these jobs because it was fun. But what I discovered is it was getting in the way, not just of scaling the organization to what the board needed, but of me being able to breathe, of me being able to do my best work. So one of the reasons we sold the company to Yahoo is that I couldn't keep scaling it the way I envisioned. And as an entrepreneur, I wasn't ready to turn the place into an elephant. I wasn't ready to say, you know what we need? We need 5 vice presidents, and I'm just going to spend my day with them. You know what we need? We need levels of structure. You know what we need? We need repeatable jobs, not something that's a one and done situation. We need to build products, not projects. That is what the scale on offer demanded.